So this week we're on to some, what I would call new material. It isn't, in a certain sense, new. It's once you get into it, you'll realize this is stuff that is going on in the world around us. What makes it new is that we're moving beyond the material which is well established in the literature. That is, what we've been looking at before was my version of perspectives completely well established. Where we're going for the next 3 weeks is into areas where folks have been pushing around at this stuff, and there are various pieces. I've brought them together in my own way. I mean, the perspectives are supported. If you download the materials on the course website that go with it, you'll see that there are not long, but some significant lists of resources you can follow up on. That is, there's nothing unique except the perspective as a whole. So, on we move to the strategic. So basically our 7 again. And we start with the strategic. This was actually, I hate to say this, it was a lot of fun preparing this week because this is the first time these PowerPoint slides have been presented, so I had to write them. And in doing so, it forced me to dig more deeply into what I was trying to say. That is, I know what I'm trying to say, but when you're organizing materials to put it up on a slide, you have to rethink it, like how does it fit the framework? Because I've been using a framework the same week by week, so I had to rethink my materials in those senses. And what I found was, I think there's more going on here than I thought. That when we look at the strategic and then the aesthetic, that they're more applicable to organizational dynamics than I initially thought. Yes, they're used, but in what way? How far? But now I'm beginning to see them as very present. The problem was that the strategic, we're getting into something, and this is one of the reasons why this shouldn't show up in the literature the same way. This is more complex. It allows more complex forms of analysis. So let's get on then to a more complex form of analysis that exists in multiple ways within organizational settings. So the psychology of it is that there are shapes, and we're very good at recognizing shapes. That is, our brains are well prepared to see shapes and to assess them, particularly in terms of their similarities and their relational perspective to us. That is, the assumption here is evolutionary drives give us a very strong sense of space and objects, and we're very quick to assess what is similar to what is different. Okay, so we're always looking then for points of similarity in the world around us. They help orient us. Very visually, we physically feel oriented if we're in a space that visually makes sense to us, where we can see the similarities between the space we're in and the spaces that we're used to. But what we've got is, what do we mean by similar? And then it gets complicated, because our brains are good at seeing things from multiple perspectives. That is, we can take a shape and rotate it in space in our heads to see whether or not what we're looking at might in fact be similar to something we thought might have been different. That is, they may look different. Is the oval the same as a circle? Well, the answer is it depends, because it could be identical. It could just be the angle of perspective, or they might be quite different shapes. We have to rotate them in our head, see what we're looking at to figure out what we're looking at. And similarly, you know, triangles have very strong similarities between them, but are they identical? Well, it's hard to play with them, see how they are. But what's most powerful is then, with many things, as we've seen already, is our brain can use these as metaphors. That is, we move from physical objects to metaphoric objects to metaphoric relations between objects. And now we're into the realm of very complex thinking, as we'll see in some of the applications. That is, because we can rotate things in space, see them from different points of view, we can now do something which I call the matching. That is, we can explore abstract types of matching that can fill multiple dimensions. So, the core psychology of it is, if we find an expected match, we feel satisfied, even very satisfied. And if we find an unexpected mismatch, it's a sense of disgust. And then there are always the general conditions of, we look for a match, we didn't find one. Okay, but that's pretty standard, so it's not a real moral sense. But when we find it, we're expecting a match and don't find it, we can get quite disgusted. Okay? Just look at a mechanic every time he chooses the wrong wrench for, just, you should be able to just choose the right one. This is disgusting that you picked the wrong one. Now, there's a core brain process here, though, that we have to watch for as well. What do we mean by similarity? Our cultures, our experiences tell us that there are certain kinds of similarity to expect. And that leads us into stereotypes and simplistic analysis. That is, our brains are set up for quick processing, not looking for depth of analysis. Problem then is, what is the match? Is it a genuine match, or is it simply a surface match? And that's a difficult problem. We'll look at that as one of the negatives. And this is the powerful part about it. It's extraordinarily important. It's true of all of the types that training is important, but our strategic sense with proper training, and if you start thinking about what you're doing in your educational program, an awful lot of it is exactly this form of analysis. That is, you can do very sophisticated stuff once you're trained to look for the similarities. I mean, if you start looking at what is finance class about, it's for finding similarities and patterns in numbers between expected ratios and actual ratios. That's the matching function. That is, what's the similarity? Well, it's highly abstract reasoning, but it's reasoning you've been trained to do. So you've been trained to look for the matches, you find the matches, and is it ever satisfying? Should you not find the match you're looking for, it's not satisfying. So training can lead this sophisticated, this, I don't know if it's sophisticated, complex form of mental geometry, this ability to look at shapes, look for different relationships between them, and then to apply it to the world around us. It's quite amazing what we end up doing with it. In terms of what I'm looking for, in terms of the structure of relations, I'm looking at it ultimately as it drives towards moral analysis. What do we get at the issue of morality and ethics, and not finance ratios, which are interesting, but in terms of the more abstract, how do we assess what is good and bad in the world around us? How do we match up our sense of what should be, in ultimate terms, with what we're experiencing? So it means that what we're doing is we're looking for obvious, implied, or metaphoric similarities. That is, we're always doing that. And we are always doing that. The question is, how much are we? Ideally, we're not doing a lot of it because it can be hard work. That is, when you're resting, you don't really want to be looking for sophisticated relationships of similarity. No, you just want to be, okay? But this way, if you're inebriated or under the influence of drugs and alcohol, you see this either too much or not at all. That is, you're just gone from the real world. Not helpful. This is about alert, waking consciousness when you're engaged with the world around you. And you can apply it to objects, persons, and even processes. And this is the amazing thing about your brain, is that you're taking a visual object-oriented structure in your brain and applying it to very complex things that have no thingness to them, a process, a way of doing things. So it's really amazing the breadth of what you can do with this form of analysis. The matching characteristics, anything, as we've said. So stereotypes, learned prejudices, just think about that one. Intuited similarities, that is, we can just get a gut sense, is there something going on here that we don't really know, and we're just feeling for it, we're looking for an implied similarity we think is there. Or, and I think this is the most powerful in many respects, are trained responses. You're here to be trained in how to see connections between ideas, concepts in the real world in some very sophisticated ways related to business performance. That's amazing. Technical processes around complex decision making. This actually works better than the tactical. That is, the tactical is all about growth or shrinkage. We saw that. Okay, yeah, that's important. Great about incremental decisions toward progress, but it doesn't tell us about the end goals and how the tactics match the strategy that we're trying to use. It doesn't tell us about the correct value of one method versus another. It doesn't get us to that place. That is, this is about thinking through the relationship between things. So, I mean, one of my, I don't know if it's a favorite example or an unfavorite example, is using Google Maps as a way of getting to someplace. It gives you very clear incremental progress, but is it in fact the best route? The answer is, it doesn't know. All it knows is if you start this place according to its algorithm, this is, given its algorithm, the shortest distance, but it isn't getting the correct routes within that. The answer is, maybe, maybe not. Sometimes it's amazing, and sometimes it's really stupid. For example, I was in Seattle, and there was a traffic obstruction. It had me pull onto an off-ramp, and then back onto the on-ramp. Okay, so I gained like 15 seconds. That's, anyway, and it irritates all the other drivers who might have noticed me doing that. I had no idea. It said, turn off, so I turned off, and then it said, turn back on. I'm going, okay, does that make sense? Yes, incrementally it makes perfect sense. Is that a good strategic approach? The answer is, Anyway, works best as part of institutional structures and training, and the reason for that is it's because of these two. We easily develop stereotypes and learn prejudices. The problems with those can be immense. We need to reframe it. We need our strategic thinking to be part of a context that helps us focus it appropriately. Again, back to education. So that's the basic structure. Any questions on that? Yes?
Actually, this four-factor stereotype and the
Yep.
other one, it's going to help us to find the similarity, or it's going to be, because in the other course, we know them as a somebody else in the relationship. So it's going to help us, not as a stop us or make us to move slower to find the similarity, no?
So I'm not clear of the question. So
Just my question is, these factors are helping us to find the similarity at first?
yes, but not necessarily in the long term. That is, the stereotypes and learned prejudices, they move us very quickly to answers. The problem is, I just think of a marketing program where you know your prejudices against the various target groups that you've got to work with lead you to choosing a bad program because you didn't think it through.
That's actually I meant, because kind of prejudgment maybe lead us on the wrong way.
That's right. It might be accurate. Our brain wants it to be accurate because if it's accurate, we've saved a lot of work. That's why we do the training, because it helps us get around this into the things that will actually get us to the correct places. So we'll start asking new questions. In fact, that's the whole point of this course, is to train you in broad, really broad ways of analysis that check your fundamental strategies that you just intuitively and naturally bring to your decision making, so that you can think more broadly and understand those processes in such a way that you get beyond that around issues of morality and ethics, because those are so powerful within us and so important in terms of how we work. We need to have a clearer sense of what's going on there.
So if we consider that these one as a kind of tools,
Mm-hmm.
and we should train to learn how to use these tools.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. The training is just essential. I mean, that's why we don't just let you sit in classes. We actually we grade you. Why? Why do we grade people? Because it's an assessment point of have you achieved an adequate level of training that we feel you can now go forward and do your strategic analysis of whatever you're dealing with. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah. No, this is an extraordinary, powerful form of analysis. When you start looking for it in terms of how you actually function, it really gets you to places that you didn't even know that you were going initially. It's a positive experience. It helps us develop relationships in complex environments. That is, we start looking for places of interaction similarity when we don't see any initially. That's really significant. I mean, that just at the interpersonal level, that allows us to, we look for those points where we are similar to other people as a way of building relationships with them. It also means when we move into a new market, you look for similarities in the market that will be similar to the way you've already used to developing, selling products or services. It's a beginning point. It doesn't necessarily give you all the answers, but it's a way of starting your work. And then finding the match between needed characteristics, maps to terrain. Oh, think of how positive that is when you find your map actually gets you to where you're going. It's a great feeling. Tools to the job, tactics and goals, lover and beloved. Isn't that always great when it's a good match? Beliefs and anxieties, when you find a belief that fits your anxiety and resolves it, this is really powerful stuff as positive experiences. I don't go into dopamine release here, but there's possibility that at the positive level there is also dopamine release in the brain that gives us a certain pleasure that drives us back to it. But it may be, my experience of this is doing research I find really difficult. Looking for the match between the materials and underlying theories is hard work. And when I finally get it so it matches, powerful, good feelings that come with that, that compensate for the extraordinary pain and suffering of trying to figure my way through my data, which can take years of very difficult work. So maybe there's pleasure chemicals being produced in the brain as well. There certainly is around there, but this also triggers huge hormonal shifts in your bodies. Anyway, there's a lot going around there. Yes, it's a match, but you're wired for that kind of match in some completely other ways that I don't care about. We're talking about the prefrontal cortex and how it functions. There's a certain sense in that one cuts out the prefrontal cortex. You lose your rationality entirely. But it is a match. There is a certain sense of matching. The negatives to this are very significant. It's easy to pick up on the wrong characteristics. Are you looking for the right things? And that's really difficult. One of the things that your statistics class is about training you not to jump to conclusions based on surface numeric similarities. That is, look for the true underlying relationships. Because it's really, I have a presentation just did actually at the conference, where I start off with a really lovely chart that shows a really nice set of relationships between my data points. And then I take it apart because underlying it is this chaos. It's pure, I don't know if it is pure chance, but the things that should be driving those surface similarities simply aren't there. It's, as far as I can tell, it's a null hypothesis. Maybe not, or maybe there is a genuine pattern underneath it, but I can't see it once I start digging for it. One of the things I love about your prof, Eric, is he's amazingly good at finding patterns when you can't find any. But they might be really, really weak. But he can find them. He has the tools. It's quite amazing stuff. On the other hand, he's also really good at showing you have no relationship when you do think you have one. But that side, it's easy to pick up on the wrong characteristics. And I'm going to change this because we're just about at the end. Okay.